Hi guys, Nicky here. In this video I want to talk about how Ansible stores values in variables, lists and dictionaries. So one of the advantages of automation is that if you're managing a network with hundreds of routers and switches, you can maintain a consistent design across all of those devices by storing your configuration parameters centrally and making sure that they're configured consistently across the network. So as we all know, when we're configuring a network, some values will be shared across all routers, such as an NTP server, SNMP config, etc., while other values will be unique per device, like IP addresses, etc. So Ansible allows us to store those values in different formats. So in this video, I'm going to look at deploying NTP config to my 6 routers in the network and using the different methods through variables, lists, and dictionaries. So there's no right or wrong way to do it in this particular video, but it just allows me to demonstrate what each of these different parameters are. Because while Ansible, you don't need to be a programmer to get up and running with Ansible quite quickly. These are programming constructs, so hopefully through this video I'll be able to show that they're easy to understand and quite intuitive. So in this slide here, I've listed the 3 types that we're going to discuss. But firstly, just quickly going through them, a variable is a single value that is applied to a variable name, such as NTP underscore server and this IP address. And then when we refer to the NTP server, we just use the variable name, whether it's in a Jinja 2 template or in an iOS underscore command, as I will show in a couple of minutes. With a list, it's used to store multiple values. So if we had multiple NTP servers, we could create an NTP servers list and apply them in square brackets. And then a dictionary is when we use key value pairs. So in this instance here, we have a tunnel, and the key value pairs is IP mask and MTU. And when we refer to those in a template, we can refer to tunnel.ip, tunnel.mask, and tunnel.mtu. And the good thing about this is that if you have these values stored centrally and you need to change them, you can just change them in one place, and then they can be deployed to a large number of routers, whether it's 6 in this lab or hundreds in a real network. You just change it in one place, run your playbook, and it gets applied everywhere. So with that, I just want to move on to configuring our network. So again, it's this simple lab. We're going to concentrate just configuring NTP on the 6 routers for this lab here. And my host file again is grouped by PE, CE, and then routers where I have both the PE grouping and the CE grouping. So I'll be referring to routers in the playbook. So in my first playbook, I'm just going to configure 2 NTP servers and vars. So you can declare your vars directly in your playbook. There's numerous places that you can declare your variables. It can be in dedicated files. It can be applied from the command line when you run Ansible -playbook, or it can be directly in your playbook, as I'm doing here, and numerous other ways. But in this one again, my connection type is network underscore CLI. I've set gather facts to false, so I'm not going to be gathering any facts in this playbook. and I want to run this against my routers group, so all 6 routers. So with the vars keyword, I can declare my variables. So ntp1 10.1.1.1 and ntp2 10.2.2.2. And then I use the iOS config command to configure my NTP, and I use a loop method called with items in this instance. So my config command is going to be NTP server and one of these IP addresses, and the way that we select those when we're using vars is we put in double braces an Ansible keyword called item, and then with this loop construct here we go with items and we list each of our variables that we want to apply, in this case NTP1 and NTP2. And I've also added a verification step where I want to verify on each of the routers that the config that I intended to be applied is actually applied. So I'm simply using iOS command and I'm running the command show NTP, and with the register command, I'm registering the result to a variable called result, and then finally I use the debug command to display that result on the screen, selecting the standard out underscore lines option, which will clearly show it on the screen. So let's just firstly run this playbook. So just include my host file. Oh, I've got a typo here, so let me just fix that. It's probably an indentation error. Yeah, so indentation is very important in Ansible. Everything must align or it will complain. So I'll just move it all back one and then we should be good to run. Do I have another one? I moved the wrong one. So now we're going to configure NTP on all of our devices. So you can see that it's changed each of the devices, and it's applied the 10.1.1.1 NTP server and the 10.2.2.2. Then we run the iOS command and we display it, and we can see that in each of the routers we now have NTP server configured. And if we just go into one of the routers, so we'll select router 2, and we just run the show NTP config, and we can see we've got 2 NTP servers configured. So next we're going to modify the script again just to remove the NTP servers so I can move on to doing the same config but with a list. So I'm just going to change that to no NTP server, run it again, and it will just remove those 2 NTP servers. So just demonstrates how you can use this to remove config as well as add config. Same process again. And in the verification we'll see the NTP process is not running, and we can just verify it directly as well. So if we just move on to the next one where we're going to do it again, but this time with a list. So this time the exact same, except for NTP servers is declared here, and the dash here is each element in the list. That's how we declare a list in YAML format. And the iOS config lines is the exact same, but we change with items, and instead this time we've only got one line that declares NTP server, that declares the NTP, calls the NTP servers list, and then the next two steps are the same as before. So it's a little bit less code here, so it's a bit tidier, and it will give us the exact same result. NTP list. So we run that. Indentation again. So this time it's the last one. So as expected, it successfully applies the config, and the verification is as we would expect, two NTP servers configured, but this time using a list. So I'll just, as before, I will remove the config. And then we can move on to doing the same thing again, but in a dictionary. So there it's removed. So then we move on to ntp-dict.yaml. And this time NTP servers, it doesn't have the dash. I'm using the key and value construct of a dictionary, NTP1 and NTP2. And I have to change my iOS config command this time. Firstly, instead of with items, I'm now saying with dict. So I'm telling the loop construct that I'm going to pass a dictionary into it, and it's got the same name, NTP underscore servers, as before. And then in the actual command NTP server, I'm calling item.value. So I'm saying I want to configure the value of the two keys, and the next two tasks are the same, just show NTP config and display the result. So we'll just run that one. And exact same result again. We applied the config as we'd expect, and we verify, and we'll have our two NTP servers applied again, but this time storing our values in a dictionary. So the outcome is the same every time, but it's just a simple demonstration of how you use variables, lists, and dictionaries in Ansible. But as I said at the beginning, you can store variables in numerous different places. So then it becomes important to understand which takes precedence. So if you have a variable stored in your playbook and in somewhere else in a file. If you store variables in a file, you can include those variables with the keyword include underscore vars, but you can also include them in two Ansible directories that are called host underscore vars and group underscore vars. So host underscore vars is a directory where you would store variables that are applicable to one single host. So router 2 or router 4 or router 5 or whatever. And group vars is a directory structure where you would store variables, lists, and dictionaries that would apply to all your devices that you're automating. But if you go to the Ansible documentation, you can see the precedence, and it will, let me just find this. If we search for, I think using variables, it should have the precedence for us. Yep, variable precedence. You can see here that there's lots of different places that we can declare these variables. So it is possible that you could have a variable, say NTP underscore server, declared in lots of different places, but really best practices would be that you try and minimize that as much as possible, that you because it could get confusing if you have the same variable name located in multiple places, and you'll be asking yourself the question, well, which one takes precedence? But this is the precedence with the bottom taking the most precedence always wins and works up the list. So what we were doing is play vars, declaring the vars inside our play. But you've also got what I'm going to show next is playbook group vars and playbook host vars. So the host vars, a variable assigned to a particular host, will take precedence over a variable assigned in the group vars. So if I go back to my Linux machine, I have created these two directories, and these directories are special name directories that Ansible understands. And if these are created, your Ansible playbook will always look in these directories for variables. And in here, I've created, in host vars, I've created a file called rtr6, and this has to match exactly what you have configured in your host file. So hosts. So the router name in the host file is rtr6, and in there I have declared my dictionary NTP servers again, but for whatever reason on router 6 we've decided that its NTP server config is going to be in the 172.16 range, not the 10 range. And I've also created the group vars directory, and in there you can put your variables into a file called all.yaml that again Ansible will recognize, and it will include all the variables that are declared in that file. And in that file I've also created a dictionary with the exact same name as the one that I used in the previous plays, with the original NTP servers in the 10 range. So if I just now look at my playbook that refers to the host vars group vars, if I have a look at this, you'll notice that it's simpler again. I haven't declared any vars, I've removed that completely. And I'm just going straight into configure my NTP servers with the iOS config module and with dict, and I'm calling NTP servers. So in this instance, when it runs through the routers, if it goes to router 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, the only place it's going to find NTP servers in group vars. But for router 6, it's going to override ride group vars and deploy the NTP server's dictionary that it's found in the host vars directory. So let's just run that. No indentation problems there by the looks of it. So it's ntp dict hvgv.yaml. And this time we'll hopefully get a different result. So we can see our 10 range is applied to 1 to 5, and now we can see here that router 6 has got different NTP servers. So the host vars is taking precedence over the group vars for router 6. And we can see here as well, when we display the standard outlines, that we have the 1726. So again, on router 2, if we look, as expected, we have the NTP servers in the 10 range, and if we just connect into router 6, just to double check that it's how we expect to see it, and we can see there that it's using the 172.16 range. So that's it. I hope that's given a good overview of how we use variables, lists, and dictionaries in Ansible, and just important to remember the precedence and the order to take if you are using the same variable name for whatever reason in multiple places. So thank you very much.